Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. This video is basically a follow-up or expansion on my video that I created on Wednesday that basically, I think the title is Nick Fuentes Wants to Destroy Western Civilization. It's the one where he has that clip on Twitter where he talks about like, oh, I'd rather have communism than what we have right now. And how it just kind of shows that he doesn't really understand what Western civilization is built off of and what makes it great if he basically makes that point. Yeah. So I got a lot of feedback on that video, a lot of comments on that video, because basically there is a Twitter page that posted some clips of it, and it's a pretty decently followed Twitter page. It's a lot of groypers on that page, and they posted a couple clips from that video on their page, and I think Dobby told me about it, and yeah, basically. So I saw that, and yeah, then a bunch of groypers came to my channel and started commenting on my video, which it's a good time. If you see the video that I did the other day about responding to critique, you'll know how I responded to that. Basically, humor. It's very funny to me how these irrational people critique me, and it's just fun. It's just fun to see. It's a fun little game. That's what this internet politics stuff is, basically. But I also got a critique from Dobby that I did not go as in depth as I could have in that last video. And I didn't go. Yeah, I basically just had a few like assumptions that I laid out there. My major assumption was, or that I just not necessarily assumptions, unjustified premises that I laid out there, and I didn't go in depth explaining them as much. So basically the purpose of this video, now that I'm basically getting to the point laying out all the history, is basically answering his critique. Like as I said in my last video, I actually have experienced both sides of that critique dichotomy that I talked about, having irrational critiques levied at you by the groypers and rational critiques levied at you by other objectivists like Dobby. So he said I should go more in depth on this topic and basically more or less explain what Western civilization is and why Nick Fuentes' ideas are anti-West and don't understand the essence of what Western civilization is. So to do this, basically my premise is that Western civilization is built off of individualism. That's what makes the West great, and Nick Fuentes doesn't acknowledge this because he is explicitly anti-individualistic, and he's a Catholic. He's a very religious person. He thinks the West is great because of its religion. And my basic response to this is basically my shorthand response, is look at the Industrial Revolution, compare it to the Dark Ages. The Dark Ages were a time of little innovation, all that sort of stuff. Little innovation, little thought, very irrational times, very low life expectancy, all that sort of stuff. And the Industrial Revolution was a time of freedom, of capitalism, a time where the life expectancy shot up, where the quality of living, it was basically a hockey stick graph. Just everything shot up. The West became more wealthy, and that's why nowadays the West is great. So that is basically my thesis. Now, I didn't go very in depth in that. That's basically the essence of what I said in my last video. So basically the goal is to go more in depth with it in this video. Basically explain the history of the West and why the West is great today. And I think most people acknowledge that. There's some people who don't, but I'm not interested in talking to them today. The West is obviously great because, I mean, it is the most wealthy, full of the most wealthy nations, the most prosperous nations, all those sort of things. If you want to live a good life, you live in the West. So yeah, let's begin. Let's begin with Western history. So I think most people start Western history, and I'm going to start Western history as well, with the ancient Greeks. The ancient Greeks basically were a very rational people. They were focused very much on reason. Their gods were not like these supernatural, high power, perfect deities that we have today with Christianity. They were similar to humans. They were more powerful, of course, but they were somewhat similar to human beings, because they had flaws. They had moral flaws, and they were all like jealous of each other and all those sort of things. So they didn't have these like high views of the gods where they would like worship them and stuff like that. They viewed them as similar to people in their emotional state and fairly irrational. And also the Greeks were very focused on rationality with people like Aristotle. But to begin with, they were just focused on understanding the world. They believed that the human mind could discover the world and learn things about the world. So this led them to basically inventing philosophy, looking at the world, questioning what makes up reality. That was basically the first question. And some people said it was water, some people said fire, and all that sort of stuff. I don't need to get too deep into that. And then you had Socrates, who basically who taught Plato, who taught Aristotle, and this is like the beginning of the best of philosophy of the West. Plato basically set up the branches of philosophy: metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, politics, aesthetics, and Aristotle, in my opinion, perfected it. And if you look at most of Western history, you can see it's largely a duel between Aristotle and Plato. Plato basically had this view that that reality isn't perfect, that everything in reality reflects these perfect forms that we can't know as human beings through reason, or we can know through reason, but we I'm not explaining his view very well. But he had this view that reality, or that only certain people can know what these true forms are, and these are the philosophers. These people become philosopher kings who know more than the rest of the populace and basically tell everyone what to do. It's opposed to the view that the individual mind can use reason to discover truths about reality for itself. Aristotle was the opposite of this view, basically. He explained that no, human beings, each individual person can know reality for himself and can discover truth for himself. And ultimately in ethics, he had this very positive concept of eudaimonia, that every human being's goal should be to achieve happiness. And this is the positive element of the West. This is what makes the West great. Aristotle's influence, this idea that individuals can use reason to achieve happiness for themselves. This is what makes the West great. Then after that, you later have the Romans, who developed basically off the backs of the Greeks. Roman civilization is very similar to Greek civilization to begin with. Also, going back to Greek civilization, they had this view that you want to discover and know more about reality led them to a good amount of scientific discoveries, especially with Aristotle, and a lot of development. Greece is kind of this like shining spark that gets Western civilization going. Which is much different than the rest of the world, which was still enshrouded in mysticism for the most part. So this is what made the West great, Aristotle. So then you go to the Roman Empire, and this is around the time basically when Jesus happened, when Jesus died on the cross and Christianity began. And Christianity was very much based off Plato, this idea that there's a supernatural realm, that human beings are flawed, can't truly know reality, and basically they need some higher power, which is God. And this led to a very anti-individualistic sentiment, and ultimately to the fall of Rome, because, the Romans were... I'm not a historian by any means, so I might not get everything accurate here, but I do know these general principles. And basically, when the Romans began to accept Christianity, when they became more mystical, they began to fall. When they left behind being a republic and converted to a dictatorship, basically, that's when they began to fall, because the people of the civilization can't elect their leaders and know what's best for the civilization. You need these great benevolent leaders who know the forms, or who are religious and understand the mystical realm and what basically understand God and that sort of stuff. And that basically was their fall after they began to accept those things. I don't know. I understand these basic concepts, these basic ideological trends, but I don't feel like there's any need to get into all these specific details of exactly what happened, because that's not necessary for looking at history. You look at trends and you look at ideas. Ideas are the motor of history, because human beings act based off of ideas. Basically, after that, Rome fell into, or the West fell into the Dark Ages, a time which was dominated by Christianity. This is basically when the Pope ruled. And this is a time of all these fragmented states. Nobody really develops any new ideas. It's just people talking about Christianity more. And people are living really short lives. There's not really any progress, not really any innovation. I'm sure there were a few innovations, but this was not like a big deal. This was not like the spirit of the Dark Ages was no innovation, no real science, no real discoveries, no real new philosophical ideas. There was the focus was not on reason. It was not on the individual mind. It was the idea that the individual is flawed. The individual can't know reality for his or herself. And this led to very hierarchical structures with these kings leading, basically, and with ultimately the Pope being like the arbiter of what is good and what is bad. And basically it was very like theocratic rule, because the Pope knows what's best, and because he is this higher being this higher person who has contact with God and or contact with this world of forms. It's very, very, very Platonic. And basically people were largely enslaved. There were a lot of serfs at the time, and this was not a very good time in human history because people were not trusted to use their own minds, to be free, to create for themselves, to be individuals and pursue their own happiness, like what Aristotle said. This is until, or actually, let me contrast this actually for the Groypers. There's also this other civilization who accepted Aristotle at a similar time. This was the Islamic civilization, and this led to the Islamic Golden Age, where math and science prospered. There was lots of good philosophy going on at the time. This is where people were living good lives, was over in the Middle East. The Muslims were living good, happy, prosperous lives because they trusted the individual mind. They believed that individuals could find reason. This is, of course, until they started to oppose reason, and I forget the name. I'm thinking back to Rucka's song. I think it's like Al-Ghazali. I think that's the name of the dude who basically started to oppose reason in the Islamic world and said that no, human beings can't use reason, individuals can't use reason, we need to go back to Islamic theocracy. And this is, now you see today what we have with the Muslims in the Middle East. They're not very rational people. They're focused very much on God and religion, and not the most prosperous civilization at the moment. So yeah, let's go back to the West. This is when you had a man named Thomas Aquinas, who I respected back when I was religious, and because I would have considered myself more of like one of the rational religious people. But I respected him back when I was religious, and I still respect him now, because basically what he did was he took Aristotle's ideas and basically tried to combine Christianity with reason. And this basically led to the Renaissance. It led to a rebirth of Greek civilization. It's when Aristotle was basically injected back into the West, when individuals were allowed to think again, allowed to make discoveries again, when individuals were beginning to try to live to be happy again. And this is also a good time when the art began to change from just really like pessimistic, super religious art to it's still religious art, but it's more like glorifying the human body and glorifying life. This is the art of the Renaissance, basically. And this rebirth and injection of Aristotle, the ideas of individualism, of reason, of this idea that the individuals can discover reality and know truth of themselves and achieve happiness for themselves. This is when this was injected back into the West. It was injected back into the West, and this ultimately culminated in the Enlightenment, which is known as the Age of Reason. Basically, when individuals were very much like, this is when the philosophy was very much, you can reason, you can think for yourself, and it led to, this ultimately culminated in the founding of America. The Enlightenment basically applied these ideas of Greek philosophy, reason, individual happiness, all these sort of things got applied to politics with Lockean philosophy, the idea that every individual has the right to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness. Because individuals can think for themselves, they can live for themselves as well, because they can discover truth for themselves and discover what is best for them to live for themselves, and therefore they should be allowed to pursue happiness for themselves. And all of this culminated in what created America. These individualistic ideas, this is key, these individualistic ideas culminated in the creation of America, the only real country founded on these ideological principles. And yeah, this basically led to America's prosperity, because during the Industrial Revolution, which happened right after America's founding, since America was founded on these principles, it's very explicitly founded on Lockean rights, this idea that individuals can think for themselves and pursue happiness for themselves. And right after this, you have the Industrial Revolution, which is when individuals thought for themselves, were rational for themselves. I'm gonna keep repeating this point because this is key. Were allowed to use their own minds to think about reality and find new ways to create things, to mix different ingredients in reality, to produce new things, to create all the advancements of the Industrial Revolution. And during this time, you see life expectancy, standard of living skyrocket. It's a hockey stick graph for all of human history. It was just basically flat until the Industrial Revolution, where everything skyrockets, because this is the first time that we truly allowed individuals to use their mind to discover reality and to put different things together and create new things and be productive for themselves and achieve their own happiness. And this is what America's about. This is basically the reason why America is great. And then these ideas, like in the West as well, this is when people started throwing off all the theocracies and all the authoritarians in the authoritarians in the European countries. And this is what made the West great, because we industrialized, we allowed the human mind to think for itself and produce for itself, and it led to prosperity, because when the human mind is free, it creates amazing things. And this is what the Industrial Revolution was, and this is why so much good happened during the Industrial Revolution. This is what made the West great and as prosperous as it is today. So, and basically Ayn Rand explains all of this in her novels, and Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal explains it. She basically, her philosophy is very much based on the Industrial Revolution and like what led to it. And basically, if you look at all of history, you see how Aristotle's ideas made the West great in the Industrial Revolution. So yeah, he made the West great with the Industrial Revolution. And now, this is why I get so annoyed when people like Nick Fuentes, the Catholics, the Groypers, argue against these individualistic principles, because they are directly opposing the human mind, the idea that a human being should be able to think for himself, to live for himself, to use his own mind to produce for himself, and create things. He's directly opposing that. He's directly opposing what America was founded on, these principles, that a human being lives for himself. Because he believes that America should be a Christian nation, which is what America was during the Dark Ages. He believes that America should go back to the Dark Ages, to these Christian principles that people can't think for themselves, that we need to look to God, that we need to look to family, that we need to look to all these things, and that we can't allow in immigrants because we need to like protect our own people, and all those sort of very collectivistic ideas. Because thinking about your own people doesn't take into account individuals. It doesn't take into account this idea that an individual has the right to pursue things for himself. It makes them simply a part of this collective whole, that they can be sacrificed to as well. So that's the issue with all of Nick Fuentes' ideas. It's very much based on these Platonic ideas, these ideas that are going to lead us back into the Dark Ages. So yeah, I'm trying to think if that's all I had to say or not. But basically, Nick Fuentes' ideas lead us to the Dark Ages, and Ayn Rand's ideas are pro-industrial revolution. And this is why I claim that Nick Fuentes is anti-American. He opposes everything that has made the West great. He opposes everything that has made America great. He is directly opposed to this because his ideas directly lead us back to the Dark Ages. So his opposition to immigrants, based on the fact that they are probably opposed to Western values, and because they can't think for themselves, they're simply part of this larger culture, is so directly antithetical to the ideas of the Enlightenment, the ideas of Aristotle, the ideas of the Industrial Revolution that made America what it is, that made the West what it is. So when one of their main theses is that theses I don't know, but one of their main points is that immigrants, they have this set culture, they're not going to change. And if you look historically, you see every group has largely fit into American culture. You look at the Italians, they've largely fit into American culture. You look at the Irish people, they've largely fit into American culture. And as long as we don't promote these multiculturalist ideas that the West isn't the best, like what the left is doing, which I'm very opposed to, by the way, as long as we don't promote those multiculturalist ideas that these people should keep to themselves, then I don't see any reason why they wouldn't assimilate, why they wouldn't become part of a larger Western culture. Because individuals have the ability to reason, to think for themselves, to adopt better ideas. And this is what the West feeds them, as long as we are confident in ourselves and believe that the West does have the best ideas. Now, the issue with Nick Fuentes is he doesn't believe that the West has the best ideas, because he doesn't believe that individuals should be free to reason, that they have the ability to reason for themselves, because he believes that immigrants are determined to be this certain way. So when these immigrants come to America, they will assimilate if we are strong on our principles, if we believe in, if we strongly believe in these American principles. So this is why I fight multiculturalism as well as the Nick Fuentes types. But I think the Nick Fuentes types are much more dangerous because they claim to want to preserve Western civilization while at the same time destroying all the ideals that it stands up for. The idea that individuals can reason and think for themselves and use their own mind to discover truths about reality. And when you believe that immigrants can't do that, when you believe that human beings, these immigrants, they can't come in and assimilate to these better values of American culture, you are very explicitly denying the fact that human beings have the ability to think for themselves. You're very explicitly denying that individuals have their own minds, that aren't necessarily part of this collective. You're implicitly denying those facts that Western civilization was built off of, that America was founded on. So, and that is why I think it was like very abhorrent or very telling when Nick Fuentes argued that that he would rather have communism than what we have right now, because communism is directly opposed to those ideas. It's the worst possible philosophy. Now, when he argues against this dichotomy of capitalism and communism, he's implicitly arguing against the dichotomy between reason and unreason. Reason is what made the West great. When you think that's not the dichotomy, you are arguing against what made the West great, because you're saying it doesn't matter. Reason doesn't matter. He thinks that Christianity is what matters. And I mean, as I kept saying in that video, if Christianity is what matters, then we should invite in all the Mexicans we can, because Mexicans are the religious ones. We're the secular ones. The West is extremely secular, and that's the reason that it's great, because it's doesn't say that some God knows more than you, that there's this God that knows real reality, and you need to look to him because human beings can't know reality for themselves. That's what the West was based off of. Those ideas are what the West is based off of. And when people like Nick Fuentes deny that, they are denying what made Western civilization great. And that's why I made that video. And Davi, I hope this cleared up. I hope this video went in depth enough. Please respond to me. Give critiques to this video. Everyone give critiques to this video. If you're a griper, I'm gonna laugh at you. And if you're an objectivist, I really do want your critiques, because thank you. This video is very fun to make, and I do appreciate Davi's critiques. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say for this video. This is one of my longest just straight talking videos, because I wanted to go really in depth with this one and make sure that it went well. It was all extemporaneous, by the way, too. There was one pause when my roommate walked in for a second, but that was all good, because I think I basically concluded this video pretty well. And yeah, this is definitely my longest video that is not scripted or based on anything really. I've never wrote a scripted video, but this is probably my longest that isn't directly responding to another video, because in those videos, a lot of the videos, the other video playing and me responding to it, and it's a lot easier to keep rambling when I talk in those videos. But these ones, it's a lot more difficult because it's just me straight talking. It's me having to come up with my own ideas. But yeah, I think that is everything that I had to say in this video. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Peace.